A few months ago, I had a hacker come and talk to my bank and try to convince my bank that they were the new financial controller for me. And my bank sent me a screenshot and texted it to me saying, hey, did you really, are you really adding this person to the account? And I said, oh my gosh, don't do anything. Do not wire all of those millions of dollars out of my account. And, I had to hire a whole firm to come in and do a forensics analysis and find out how this happened in the first place. But you're right. You put all your eggs in one basket, it does make you a target. Kris Krohn here with Have It All. And today I am joined by John Swallow, former Attorney General for the state of Utah. And we're talking about how to protect yourself from lawsuits. So I'm a business owner. I own hundreds of businesses. And I got to tell you, the more money you make, the bigger the target gets. And also there's situations where, guess what? You've been wronged. And the question is, what do you do? We live in a very litigious society. So today I want to get some real practical application. And more than anything, how do you insulate yourself and become bulletproof? How do you actually really protect yourself? John's working on a brand new book, So Sue Me. And it has to do with these 7 different methods and ways. We're going to talk about just a few things that you can do to really protect yourself and make yourself as untouchable as possible. So John, thank you so much for being here today.
It's great to be with you, Kris, always. Thank you.
Awesome. So first of all, give us a little bit of a background and a rundown, because you are no ordinary lawyer.
I like to tell people when they say, what kind of lawyer are you? And I say, of course, I'm an honest lawyer, right? So,
okay.
No, I actually have a great breadth of experience. I've been a partner in a law firm, a civil law firm, a litigator. So I go to court and I fight, right? I've been a corporate general counsel for 2 companies. One became a $400 million dietary supplement company that dealt with government issues like FDA issues and FTC issues, those kinds of things. And then I went into public service. I served three terms in the state legislature as a lawmaker. And then it wasn't enough for me, enough punishment for me. So I joined the Attorney General's office and I became the Chief Deputy Attorney General, where I was there for 3 years. And then the Attorney General, the elected Attorney General for my state. What an incredible experience that was. So I've had a real
You've got an amazing
breadth of experience.
Resume, track record,
Yeah.
Up until a few years ago when something really crappy hit the fan.
Yeah.
Because what was it? You had only been in office for a couple of weeks, and what happened?
Yeah, they started making these allegations that I tried to bribe a U.S. senator who I hadn't even met before, really, basically. And so it was just bizarre. And the papers took it and ran with it and made it into a big story. The legislature decided to investigate. The feds decided to investigate.
So this became federal. This was also on a state level.
State
the
level,
FTC
federal
got
level.
involved.
And it just was like this perfect storm that just snowballed out of control. And finally, after 11 months, I decided it was so distracting to my office, the people who worked for me, who loved serving the state of Utah, that I decided I'm going to step aside and become a private citizen again and stop some of those investigations and then just fight back.
Really? So you did decide, you had to fight back.
I had to fight back. I
Because
really
if you
had no
had
choice.
it, what could have happened?
Well, I mean, they were going to charge me with crime, state and federal crimes, and the federal government decided they wouldn't prosecute because they didn't have anything, and the state, it turned out, didn't have anything either. But there were politics involved, and they decided to press forward with charges, and I beat them. I beat them at a 4-week criminal trial, not guilty on all 9 counts, and I walked away a free man. But it made me think about, how many other people are there out there who just didn't have the resources or the knowledge to really stand up against a government assault or a lawsuit. If it's not a government assault, maybe it's a private lawsuit or things. And I thought, what can I do? What can I say? What can I share? What do I understand that regular people don't understand to help them survive something that I went through and survived?
It's really interesting, John, because when I look at my own business career, I literally went from really, really poor to quite wealthy. And along the way, I've gone through this evolution. And I'm actually going to share publicly, I can't believe I'm going to do this. I'm going to share probably one of the most embarrassing, personally humiliating moments of my life legally. My wife and I, we had bought our very first house, and we bought it in the summer. And so we didn't have to turn the furnace on. And this old house from the 40s had a really old furnace in it. So when it came time to turn the gas on, I asked
Did you blow up your own house?
No, but I blew up my face. I asked this guy to come and show me how to use this really old furnace, and he showed me how to turn it on. Well, I didn't need to turn it on. I wouldn't need to for months. Months later, I went down and I woke up on a cold morning, and Glenn's like, well, better test out this furnace. I walked downstairs, I had matches, and I turned on the pilot, and then I realized I didn't have my matches. So I went up to go get them, brought them back. And by the time I lit it, there was so much gas that when I lit it, it blew into my face. It cinched my eyelashes, eyebrows, hurt so bad. Went to the ER, got some pain medication. Fortunately, there was no permanent damage. But I spoke with a lawyer and I decided to sue the gas company, for those damages. And I said, they showed me how to use it incorrectly. And to this date, so ashamed that I was awarded out of settlement enough money to buy a new furnace. At the time, I was incredibly proud of myself. And then years later, as I started going on a self-discovery journey of right and wrong and also victimhood, I realized that I was showing up as the victim. It wasn't the gas company's fault that I chose to turn on the furnace the way that I did. I blamed them for my own problem, and yet legally I won. And I was so ashamed one day to come to that realization because I went from being so proud of that moment, like the small guy won against the big guy, and then realized I had taken advantage of a company that hadn't done any wrong against me. And so it's weird for me to actually air that out and just say, even now, it just brings up so much weird juju. And I guess I'm bringing it up, John, because I have sued people before and I've been sued before. And when you get thousands of clients like I do every single year, you're bound to have, a very, very, very small percentage of issues that can turn a little bit legal. Fortunately, it hasn't happened a ton, but it's happened enough where it's caused me to really reflect on what's right and what's wrong. What choice can I make that honors me? And what choice can I make that will make me proud? Because it's not always easy to know what to do when either you've been sued or you've been wronged.
Right.
So how does someone make heads or tails of that?
Well, you're right. We all have this opportunity to make our own personal moral judgments about what we think is right and wrong. And a lot of times we get it wrong because we just don't have enough information, right? Like you didn't have enough information. And then we end up years later saying, now, where do I send this check to kind of reimburse someone for how I took advantage of? But the reality for us on the other side of that is if you're sued or if you're investigated or if you're prosecuted, if you end up needing a lawyer to either reclaim something like you're injured in a car accident, where do you turn and how do you really understand whose fault it really was? And then how do you make a claim and actually get money back when you deserve it? And what you have to understand, Kris, is you're going up against a big entity, an insurance company, like in personal injury, or the federal government or the state government if you're being investigated and prosecuted, if you're in a small business or if you're an individual, if you're a politician or something like that. So it's really hard, first of all, to know what to do and what your rights are and who's right and who's wrong. And you have to educate yourself. You have to talk to people like that, right? And obviously you were young and you're recently married. And by the way, everybody has an ego, right? We're not going to admit that we're wrong. And so someone else must be to blame.
Karma came around
right?
and slapped me so hard in the face because, years later, I spent $1 million defending myself against the state government. Yep. And it was almost like this, okay, touche. What went around came around, and I hope I've learned my lesson. And since then, it really has been me asking. I had a business partner that once said, Kris, when you're trying to strike a business deal, imagine for a moment that you got a cake and you're holding the knife, and you've got to find a way to slice up the cake and offer a piece to them and offer a piece for yourself. And you're both trying to find a way to win. And he said, how you know when you found potentially the right win-win? It's when you would take either slice of the cake. And since then, I've started asking, anytime things go legal, I'm not just saying, what about me? I'm saying, what about them? Right? What is really right? And I think one of the things that's happened for me, I wonder what your experience you've had with this, is that you've got to have dealt with clients in the past like me that are hallucinating a version of reality that maybe isn't that right. And what do you do when you're a lawyer and it's like, okay, well, I could tell this person to fight and I'm going to earn some money and I'm going to get paid. But in the end, it might end in settlement and it's going to cost them doubly. They're going to have to pay to settle and all have been paid. What do you do when your client is conflicted and they think they're in the right, but you don't?
Yeah, that's a great question. And fortunately, I'm in a situation in my career, in my life, the longevity of my career, where I really am interested in what's better for my clients rather than what's better for me. I believe that things come around in the law of the harvest and things like that. Like last week, I had a client come to me and I'd achieved a settlement for this client. And the client came back to me and said, I don't know if I want to settle anymore because I am so angry about what's happened here. Yeah. And so what did I say to that client? I said, tell you what, you take this week and think about it. You come to me on Monday, and I've got to call him back today, and you tell me what you really want to accomplish and achieve, and then we'll talk about it. Because at the end of the day, you want to help your clients really understand what they really want, and then you want to help them get it if it's right, ethical and reasonable. And so I guess my answer is, how do I deal with it? I deal with it hopefully from an area of integrity, and try to help them understand what the consequences are of their decision, and that they can decide what they want to do, and I'll help them get there.
Makes sense. So let's do this. Let's talk about how people protect themselves.
Sure.
We do live in this crazy society where something's going to happen today that could wind up in a lawsuit, and sometimes it's devastating if you're not prepared.
Right.
So my question for you starts off with, can you even protect yourself from lawsuits?
You know, you absolutely can. And I'm glad you mentioned the book I'm working on, So Sue Me, right? 7 ways to make yourself, lawsuit proof, right? And there are things that you can do. So for example, if you're in a business, if you have all of your assets in one organization, like if you own them all yourself, or if you have one LLC and you have your house there and you have your bank accounts there and you have your retirement accounts there and you have all your properties in this one silo, then someone can blow up your one silo and take everything you've got. It makes you a real attractive target for a lawsuit, right? So if you can do things that would kind of diversify and not put all of your eggs in one basket, as they say, you can actually make it so you're less of a target for someone who you're in a business deal with to go after you and sue you for that. Okay, so that's one way that you can protect yourself.
It's funny that you say that, because a few months ago I had a hacker come and talk to my bank and try to convince my bank that they were the new financial controller for me. And my bank sent me a screenshot and texted it to me saying, "Hey, did you really, are you really adding this person to the account?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, don't do anything. Do not wire all of those millions of dollars out of my account." And, I had to hire a whole firm to come in and do a forensics analysis and find out how this happened in the first place. But you're right. You put all your eggs in one basket, it does make you a target.
It does make you a target. Other things you can do kind of just protect yourself going forward is ask yourself, what are you doing? Are you in relationships that aren't with people that you don't trust? Or are you doing things that are kind of setting yourself up for a lawsuit for discrimination or something? So one of the key principles I talk about in my book is just don't do it. I call it the Nike opposite. Maybe I'm going to get sued by Nike for that.
Opposite, just
don't do it rather than do it. So
give me an example.
Well, don't crack that joke in front of mixed company.
Got it.
Don't send that terse email until you've really thought about it for at least 10 seconds, right? Or maybe 10 days or something. Don't put it in writing. Don't touch it.
Interesting.
Don't say it. Don't express it. And the things that you shouldn't be doing anyway, right? And just resist the urge to do that. You should have a list of things you never will do. And that will protect you from being sued for discrimination or other types of...
When I married my wife, I said, "Okay, honey, I'm going to make you a promise. I know you want me to promise to be virtuous to you and fidelitous, but I'm going to go further. I'm going to make a promise that I'm going to do everything in my power to train myself, my mind, my brain, to not look at other women." There's some people out there like, "Oh, if you're, you can look at the menu." Right. I'm like, "You only look at the menu if you're hungry." And at some point, it's a gateway choice that's going to get you in trouble. And so I just made a decision for myself. If you're looking, that's the first step. That's the antecedent to winding up in a spot that you don't want to find yourself in. So I love this idea of the Nike opposite, which is just like have a little bit of common sense in a world that doesn't seem to have a lot to say, hey, where can choices lead? And if it can lead you where you don't want to be, maybe don't make the choice in the first place.
How many people do you know that says something in jest? Maybe it wasn't in jest and it came back to bite them. How many years later?
I know.
We talk about politicians who 40 years ago may have done something, maybe didn't do something, but who knows, and it gets them in trouble.
Yeah.
Another thing, without giving away the whole recipe,
give it. This is great.
You have to be in a position to defend yourself, a position of strength. They taught us in when I was Attorney General, and it was kind of becoming aware of your circumstances because your targets and kind of defense type things. I carry a weapon with me and things like that. They said if you're aware of your circumstances, if you're prepared, people are less likely to come after you.
Yes.
And it's the same thing in litigation.
Got it.
If you have a war chest, if you have a relationship with a good lawyer that you really trust, a good litigator, and people know that, then they're less likely to come after an easy target, right?
Yep.
So that's one thing I really talk about is build a war chest. Have a relationship with a lawyer you can trust and call and have on speed dial when you need them. Don't just go looking for them once you get in trouble. If you have an employment agreement, make sure it's set up to allow yourself to defend yourself if you get into a little bit of trouble with the board, and that they'll pay some of your expenses. So that's the third thing I'd say.
And just to be really clear, John here, everybody, is in-house legal for me, which now means that anytime I have to send a nastygram, anytime I need to communicate maybe with an upset client or whatever, and I need to show a little bit of strength of force, a little bit of muscle, trust me, there's nothing more powerful than getting a letter from a former attorney general, chief prosecutor that basically has an incredible history of knowing that if they're going to attack, that they're going to win.
Well, thanks, Kris.
And yeah, so thank you for being that person for me. And, I think it's really smart what you're saying right there, which is you got to align yourself with the right kind of people. So the bigger you get in business, the more successful you are, the more real estate that you buy, or the greater your assets grow. You got to be thinking not just how do I make more money, you got to dedicate some bandwidth to how do I protect it.
That's right. And then another key is that if you do get in trouble, if you do have someone come after you, how you respond is really, really important.
Ooh, tell me about it. I want to learn right now.
Absolutely. For example, if I were to get word that something's rumbling out there against me, or if I were to get served with a lawsuit, I don't want to ignore it.
Yeah.
I want to go right to my defense, right? My counsel that I've already prearranged. I've already got the money. I've got some retainer money out there. And then we get together and we put together a strategy and we talk about the truth. You want to be very honest with your counsel and then put together a strategy and then not get emotionally involved so that you're making mistakes. It's the mistakes that you make after you're aware of something that sometimes cost you everything. And so you want to have a strategy, put together a strategy, and then you want to execute the strategy without emotion.
Wow.
And that's what happened with me. I was able to say, okay, I'm smart enough, I'm experienced enough to know that I'm in real trouble here. They're really saying some things that, if it were true, could really get me in trouble, cost me years in prison or cost me a lot of money. But I haven't done those things. I've got good counsel. I've got resources to defend myself, and we're putting together a strategy. And one time I walked out of court, and this will make you laugh. I'm kind of embarrassed about this one, right? And my lawyer looked at me, and he said, because I talked to the press afterwards. I'm a politician, right? And I learned this lesson from my lawyer, my own lawyer. He said, John, you're paying me to do this job. I only need you to do one thing, and one thing only. And I said, what is that? And he said, keep your mouth shut. I'll do the talking to the press. You just knocked us off the front page. It's a true story. And I learned from that. Even as a 25-year lawyer, I'm still learning things. And my advice is put together a strategy and then don't be emotional. Realize what's important, and that's the end result. And then keep your mouth shut and put your head down and let your lawyer do the work.
Wow. Really good advice. Let's get a couple more things today on what people can do to make themselves as untouchable as possible. When you go into business for yourself, everyone says that you need to, form a legal entity, and you need to make sure that that entity is protecting you from your personal assets. Some people listening to this may not understand what we're talking about. Can you explain that?
You bet. And one of the problems people have is they don't take care of, they take care of business pretty well, Kris, but they don't take care of themselves relative to their business very well. And so they'll just go off and say, I've got this great idea, I'm going to start this business. And they don't even put any thought into the fact that, hey, if they're sued in this business, or if they run over someone and don't have enough insurance to cover the damages that they cause, if they break something, that you can be sued, and you can be sued personally, which means they can take your house, they can take your dog, they can take your furniture, they can take your car, and everything else that you personally own, right? With very few exceptions. And so to form an LLC, to understand how to do that right and not just get it off the shelf, but actually consult with a lawyer and say, here's what I'm really trying to do with this entity, and let me make sure everything's protected. And then here's what people do all the time. They form an LLC, and then they never transfer assets into it.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
I mean, that's like
like buying a Ferrari and never driving it.
Right, exactly, right? So you help them, as a lawyer, I help people not only form the entity so they can be protected. What that means is this. If I form an entity and I start a business in an entity, an LLC or a corporation or some other entity, trust, right? And if I do all my business out of that and have all my assets, my bank accounts in that entity, if I cause a problem, they can sue my entity, but they can't sue me personally. And if they do sue me personally, I can usually get it dismissed or win on what's called summary judgment. I can get myself out of it so that they're not able to attack me personally and my house and my bank accounts and everything I've saved up for my retirement, because they have only the recourse against the business that I started.
Okay, so let's say that I start some businesses and I put them all in different entities to create that corporate shield to basically protect my personal life. Is there anything I can do with my personal assets to then protect me, from people that are trying to just specifically go after them that is unrelated to my business?
Absolutely, yeah. You can form trusts, and there are very good lawyers who understand the rules of trust, and you can actually put your home, you can put your bank accounts, you can put your retirement accounts into a trust.
And how does that protect you?
And it protects you because if you do the right kind of trust, and there are many different types of trusts, but there are certain trusts that are called irrevocable trusts. And what those mean is that you don't any longer you don't own the asset, you don't own the trust itself, so you don't control the trust. But you can set it up in a way that you still maintain enough control to use all the trust assets, but technically, legally, you don't own the trust, which means that you don't own personal assets. You don't own the home. You don't own the bank accounts. They're all owned by the trust. And so if you do something to cause liability, like you run over your neighbor's dog and they want to sue you for $1 million because it was a very special dog to the family and was going to inherit everything from the family, they don't have a claim against you because you're judgment proof. And I love the term judgment proof.
Wow.
We help clients become so that they are not sued because there's nothing to receive if they win a judgment against you. So when I talk about, how to
real quick, judgment proof means because you don't really technically own anything.
You don't have any.
Hold a judgment against me, but what are you going to get?
Right. You got a paper on the wall that says they got a judgment against you, but they can't receive any assets. They can't receive any benefit from the judgment. You're judgment proof. And that's one of the principles we'll talk about in the book.
I like it. Ooh, it's been good today. I like it. So what does someone do if they have been wronged? How do they find a good lawyer that can help them get justice?
Well, I'll tell you, the lawyer that you choose is as important as the doctor you choose. If you're really sick with something terrible, some disease, some cancer or something, you don't just go pick a doctor off the shelf, do you? You
don't go to a chiropractor.
You ask around, you do your research, and you really find a good lawyer. And one of the things that I'm trying to do and offer to my clients and people who contact me is help them find counsel that I think passes that muster, that test, into someone who will really protect their rights and really fight for them at a reasonable cost so that they're not like out on their own looking through the yellow pages trying to find someone who will save their financial future in life.
Not all lawyers are created equal.
Right. And so if you go to AskJohnSwallow.com or if you go to JustJusticeForAll.com, which is my own podcast, we're going to be able to hook you up, ask any question you want and try to give you some answers and some solutions and help you. Because one thing I took out of my experience with the state when they came after me, it just fired up, reinvigorated my desire to help other people not go through what I went through, protect other people.
Absolutely incredible. John, last piece of advice. If someone here, last piece of legal advice based on everything that we've covered here, what should someone do ultimately to protect themselves legally?
Well, first of all, let me just say this. I'm not your lawyer, and I'm not giving people per se legal advice. But the single most important thing people can do to protect themselves is to think through any scenario they could possibly face in their life before it happens and be prepared so that when it does happen, or if it does happen, you are prepared to defend against it.
So, I look at my financial team and they're basically saying, okay, Kris, we want to make sure that you are optimized on all of your personal liability insurances, for your vehicles or for your house. We want you to have a private umbrella policy for insurance. We're also insuring your life. And then you've got living benefits, and then you've got trusts, and you've got entities. And they basically set everything up to make me as bulletproof as possible. If someone, technically I don't own anything. I own nothing. So if someone says, well, Kris Krohn, I'm going to sue you. I'm like, go for it. I think I'm judgment proof. I just learned today the phrase of what that means. And so I like what you're saying here about think through all the different possibilities. You might not have to do that, when you're at the beginning of the wealth building phase, but as you're accumulating more and more wealth, you need to allocate some of your time to thinking, how do I protect this wealth? Not just how do I make this wealth? Warren Buffett, you know what his number one rule is? It's don't lose money. In other words, it's like, great, we're here to make money, but make sure you don't make a choice where you're actually losing money. And because that's actually moving in the wrong direction. You're trying to move forward 10 steps,
right.
But if you're moving backwards, you're moving in the wrong direction. And so it's all about making sure that you think smart, you protect yourself. And John, it's been really great to connect with you. If someone's got a legal question and they want an attorney general in their back pocket, how do they connect with you?
Go to AskJohnSwallow.com or JustJusticeForAll.com or get a hold of you, Kris, and you've got my number on speed dial.
I do. And if there's any of you that are listening to this that own businesses, I'm just going to tell you my favorite service that John provides for me personally is you've heard of fractional CFOs, right? Because a CFO can cost a lot of money. You could have in-house legal counsel, but if your company's not at a level where that makes sense, then you can get fractional legal. And that comes in many different varieties and forms. And one thing that John does for me is John basically helps keep me protected from some of the weird, erroneous stuff that gets drummed up like twice a month. It's just stuff that comes up. I had this one partner, we had this agreement, signed a contract, we bought all these homes together, refused to put them into the LLC and says, I'm just gonna keep them in my own name, I'm just gonna keep them. And I'm like, I got it, let me get totally clear. You signed a contract, we are on track, these homes have all appreciated in value, we're on track for making not a little bit of money, and you've decided now that I've rendered my services and you've used everything, that you just don't want to go into a split with me. You want to just keep everything for yourself. Well, I got a word for you. You're a pirate. And there's no way I'm going to let that stand, because I'm not living a life where someone gets to take advantage of me. I just have to have the 9,000-pound gorilla, former Attorney General John Swallow, write you a letter, and you are going to be wetting your boots. So that's something John does for me, because you know what? Just because you're succeeding doesn't mean that you want someone to put a target on your back. I don't want that. You don't want that. And it's about making sure that you know when it's time to fight and stand up for what's right. And John helps me do that. So John, thank you for providing that for me. I'm loving this relationship and where we're growing. And I think you'll be able to provide that for some other people as well that's listening here.
I'd love to do that. And again, if you don't stand up and defend yourself, if you're not ready, you'll be rolled over, you'll be seen as weak, and you'll be taken advantage of, and you'll lose everything. You can lose everything you've worked your whole life for in 15 minutes if you're not careful.
Guys, you've been listening to John Swallow on Have It All. He's got his own podcast, Just Justice for All, and you've got AskJohnSwallow.com. Thank you so much for listening to Have It All. Today was about protecting it all, and we will join you next time.